Hello, listeners. Today, Ravi and Jam speak with NJ Ayuk from South Africa about the energy trilemma in Africa. NJ Ayuk is the executive chairman of the African Energy Chamber, a leading advocate for Africa's energy independence. He promotes policies that balance development, investment, and energy access across the continent to ensure Africans benefit directly from their natural resources. And please, do not forget to subscribe if you aren't yet. Ravi, Jose, over to you.
Thank you, Abba, and welcome, NJ, to the Unlocking the Energy Trilemma podcast.
Welcome, NJ.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Okay, so as we do with all our guest speakers, we are going to ask you to share with the audience a fact or figure related with the energy trilemma in Africa. What do you bring us?
Big numbers, 600 million without access to electricity, 900 million without access to clean cooking, most of them women. That is our biggest, not just trilemma, but actually a dilemma of where we find ourselves in Africa, and we need to turn that around.
You raise a very interesting point, NJ. Africa often gets told what the energy transition should look like, right? Usually by nations that are industrialized and have fossil fuels. How do you think African countries can actually assert their energy sovereignty and security in the context of what you just said?
I think how we assert ourselves is domestic production of energy. Most of the energy in Africa has been destined for Western nations or Asian nations. It's not really been for African nations. So domestic gas, we've not built pipelines, we've not built infrastructure, because when we can consume that much stuff that we have, then we would stop listening to others and expect more. The second part of it, financing. You have to be able to finance that growth, because we have to listen and rely on the wealthy nations, because they are promising us aid and financing for renewables, which are not bad. But the problem is that the financing never come in. They promise Africa and most third world countries $100 billion at COP. We never received that money, and it's been going on for more than 13 years. Green bonds in 2023, you had almost $400 billion. Less than $4 billion came into Africa. So we can no longer rely on the wealthy nations to get us out of this trilemma, out of this problem that we have. We have to look inward and use the $2.3 trillion private capital in Africa to get us there. Because I like Hollywood, but Superman is not coming. Batman is not coming. Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. We're gonna have to use African financing, African markets to really drive that up, because we do have the market, 1.5 billion strong. So produce energy for them, get them out of energy poverty, reduce your forex control, and you would have the money to drive up your own transition or drive your own message.
Wow. China is picking on coal, and India too, let's say, to promote their development. President Trump in the US, let's say, has reduced the pace of the energy transition in the US. Are those movements helping Africa in having a more just transition?
Yeah, absolutely, because common sense is coming back to the table. You need to look at our realities, and you need to have pragmatic common sense solutions to this. The problem we look at it today is not just having less energy or energy transition. Where are we transitioning to? From the dark to the dark? Look around Africa. Nobody wants to breathe clean air in the dark. It's time for us to have energy additions if we're going to have to provide energy for those 600 million people that don't have. It's time for us to have energy additions if we're going to have to provide clean cooking solutions like LPG or whatever for the 900 million that don't have, because you know what? They're cutting biomass, they are polluting more, and they're not, the trees that we're planting is being cut to feed people. And we have seen almost 600,000 deaths because of indoor polluting. So how do we do that? Pragmatism. They're using more coal. So the issue is not about less energy. It is that we have to have not just abundant energy, but also affordable energy, because families have to be able to buy and pay for that energy so it can drive it. We get back to the fundamentals. What is energy? And all this stuff we discussed today, it comes out of the Greek word energia, movement. And that is what moves economies. We have to be able to move economies, and energy is life. And that is what has driven, when we look at this issue, we say Western nations with long lifespan, with development, and build that. How would you not want that for the poorest of the poor in Africa? We need to drive up human flourishing with energy additions.
Mm-hmm. So Africa is a pretty large continent. You have many drivers, you have many energy sources. So in your view, what is going to be the bridge fuel? Obviously, you're making the point that electrification is more important somewhat than decarbonization, and there has to be some kind of a balance. You know, affordability is more important than breathing clean air at the moment. Yep. So what do you think is the bridge fuel that is required to provide that reliable baseload, cheap power for Africa at large?
You said key things: affordability, bridge fuel. Where you transitioning to? We can look at that bridge on a transition, and it could happen. It could be natural gas, which you say, but natural gas is not just a bridge fuel. It's a transition, but it's also a destination for us, because natural gas, it's kind of like a Swiss knife. You can use it for multiple things. Do you realize that we're begging for food today from Ukraine and Russia, countries at war, because we import billions of dollars of wheat coming out of there? So we don't want to rely on it. We want to be able to use our natural gas to power Africa. So what do? You get electricity. When you get electricity, we put ourselves in that global challenge on AI and data centers. We use natural gas. You know what we do? We build urea, ammonia, NPK, fertilizer plants. We use our vast land in Africa, create agricultural bases, feed ourselves, than relying on USAID or Russia or Ukraine for food, and also prevents our young people from trying to cross the Mediterranean, find jobs on European streets, but expand our tax bases and give people jobs and opportunities right here at home. But also, we need to be able to use nuclear energy. Fusion technologies are getting better. You could be able to use that baseload things and really have that baseload option for a long term. SMRs, because we cannot afford large nuclear. Egypt is doing something worth $15 billion. There's some African countries that cannot afford that. They would be able to use SMRs and still give them that baseload that is needed. Natural gas gives you baseload that is needed. At the same time, in Africa, we need to stop this talk about decarbonization. What's in Africa to decarbonize? It's like telling the fat kid in class to keep using coal and keep eating, while the skinny kid, you're telling them we already are anorexic, and you're telling us that we need to lose more weight. We don't have enough weight to lose. We are less than 4% greenhouse gas emission. If you produce all of Africa's natural gas and industrialize Africa, our greenhouse gas emission go up by less than 1%, 0.68%. If you use our natural gas, we get to improve our science to have electricity. But think about this. You're not telling Norway to decarbonize. Norway uses more electricity than Nigeria, the DRC, Cameroon, and Angola combined. Where is the rankles of telling Norway to stop? And then you tell us that, well, you're going to have stranded assets if you don't decarbonize. No, we're not worried about stranded assets, because we're going to use those assets in Africa. We're worried about stranded lives. So stranded lives trying to cross the Sahara into Europe, stranded lives trying to cross the Mediterranean, stranded lives within Africa Africa that have no option but to to join Al Qaeda or the other extremist group and create insecurity. There is multiple facets to this, and we need to pay attention to that.
Fully agree. And I would like to link it with a question with the emissions. Africa, as you said, emits a very small fraction of the global CO2. Yet many international players consider it central to future climate strategies. So my question is there a danger that Africa becomes a testing ground for externally driven climate agendas, for instance, carbon credits or offsets, without real sovereignty over those mechanisms?
Big time. They've pulled up this scam of carbon credits across Africa the entire time. We've not seen a dime. Listen, we got to be practical. The wealth, if emissions are the problem and you want to reduce emissions, then the wealthy nations need to decarbonize and African nations need to industrialize, because that is where we are right now. We can't turn over our resources because we're going to rely on aid. We've received promises, but these promises have been broken promises. So we're left to say, leave us alone, let us make our own choices, because this societal path that they're going through, look at what is happening in Europe today. You saw Europe, they didn't invest in agriculture, they sent their industrialization, their energy strategy was sending industrialization to China. The energy vendor in Germany, we're going to rely on cheaper gas coming from Russia. Now it's a problem. Outsource emissions to China and industrializations. Now it's a problem. What did outsource security to America? Now Trump says you need to invest, you need to put more money in NATO. So they're left with nothing. What did they invest in? They invested in ideology. Billions invested in this climate ideology, which has really ruined them. The best climate experts you find in Europe. But if emissions are the problem, let us focus on technologies to capture emissions and let us produce our energy. So you capture emissions, get that out of the way with technologies. But we've seen big things around NGOs like Greenpeace, Just Stop Oil, and Extinction Rebellion, really using their money. Here in South Africa, for example, you can't even shoot seismic. They're going on lawfare. And what do? They hold the process in courts, keep you bogged down so you can't produce natural gas that you need. And Africa continues to import a lot of gas, LPG, that can transform lives at expensive rates. So that's why when they have crisis in Europe, look at the hypocrisy in it. The hypocrisy is that you have crisis in Europe with the war starts in Ukraine. What do? They change the taxonomy on natural gas and they say natural gas is green energy together with nuclear. So you know what that happens? It paves the way for financial institutions to fund it. And they can fund natural gas, purchase, trade finance, and growth in Europe. But the poorest people of the poor, not just in Africa, the global South, you cannot finance natural gas. And multilateral institutions like the World Bank can't do it. I thought the World Bank was about development. Now it's about poverty, because you're not giving people the energy they need to be able to grow. So that is not lost among Africans when they see that and they say there's something fundamentally flawed in this climate ideology that's been preached to us.
So NJ, you made a very interesting point. You said a lot of promised financing never materialized, and that continues to happen on a regular basis for the last 30, 40 years. When I look at Africa, it almost reminds me of a lot of Africa, barring South Africa, I would imagine, especially Central Africa. It reminds me of India almost 20 years ago, when they were going on the impetus to build large power plants, and they did build about 200,000 megawatts of units. Now, the difference at that time, India was able to demonstrate some economic growth and some economic potential. And therefore, foreign direct investment came in, and a lot of that growth came through private participation and through debt, institutional debt, and through private equity and through equity from Indian and some foreign promoters. Now, the difference in Africa that I see is that there is still a lot of dependence on organizations like World Bank and International Finance Corporation. So this is almost a chicken and egg story. Shouldn't Africa demonstrate through its actions, shouldn't Africa demonstrate some serious economic growth and potential for private investment to actually come in and spur the growth that you're talking about?
I agree with you. You cannot legislate and you cannot also aid reforms and growth. You got to look at markets. So what did India do for a while? They took a issue like clean cooking. They've done amazing. I mean, they're like at 90% rates on doing the clean cooking issue. They did that. But you got to look at strategic reforms, and this is where you hold Africa accountable rather than continue to pour aid and aid and aid. And World Bank comes in and say, let's restructure and strategic restructure. No nation has ever been developed by aid and all renewables, by the way. But be very careful about this. You need to look at free markets. You need to look at limited government. You need to look at independent responsibilities. You need to look at fiscals, how you change the structure. You need to incentivize growth and you make market works. You need to open up. So instead of getting multilateral institutions and these big global institutions pressuring us to go to use solar and wind, that is not going to work. You should pressure African leaderships and to reform government, because you know what? These above ground risk issues, they are the big problems. A free and structured market is essential, as the World Bank wants, but an enabling environment is even more important. You know why? Because a young boy can get out there and start a business without having to worry about paying a bribe. Transparency becomes the rule of the game. Better governance too, so that people can go out there, the rules are there, and they can work. So when you unleash that, real potential coming, because investors come in with 5, 10, 15, $1 billion or $100 million, and they take on big projects and they accomplish them because the rules are there. So even when it comes to payments, you can't have government running everything. You can't have government on every part of the business. It just didn't work. One thing we know and we understand, one thing is that politicians are bad with money. Politicians are like a drunken sailor. The more money you give them, the more they spend, So when you get more money, circle it around with business, circle it around with investors and people. So you know what happens? You create more jobs, more opportunities, multiplier jobs, because now hotels start happening and different things are happening. You expand the tax base. So most people are not relying on government for subsidies or kind of services or for welfare or stuff like that. They're paying taxes. They get our welfare to work. And then you reduce crime. You become more investable. You become more bankable. So the banks in the country, they're seeing more transactions. They get more money. They can lend more locally, and you can also be able to syndicate. Those kind of things are where we need to be. I would rather see that kind of pressure for reforms, not pressure to say, you stay the way you are, keep this radical socialist agenda and keep you where you are, and we will end up being dependent for a long, long time. We got to look at markets. We got to make markets to work, because you know one thing? Money goes where it's welcome. We're not competing for money between Nigeria and Zimbabwe or South Africa and Mozambique or Egypt and Senegal. We're competing with Guyana for money. We're competing with Singapore. We're competing with Qatar. So money goes where it sees the right returns, and we need to leverage our position and become competitive and make ourselves more attractive. What should be the goal? The goal should be, we want to make our continent or our countries the best place to do business. Set that bar very high and go for it. Don't think that you are second class. Go for first class and say, I will be the best place to do business. If you have that vision and you put action to it, your time has come. That should be our African focus, but we need to also take care of our home situation, because it's important. The blame game doesn't work. We can't look at others and say we're victims. I don't like victimhood. We're not victims, because we need to be proud of who we are and go out there and make it happen. Because the more aid we've received in Africa, the worse our governments have performed. So aid is not the solution. We need to open up the place for business and drive more business to do better.
I love your vision, NJ. And let's talk a little bit about corporate business rather than governmental support. I think there is a gap in energy between Africa in general and other regions or countries, Western countries, China, India, Asia Pac, and so on. And I foresee a problem with the technology gap. We are talking about artificial intelligence. It's going to create another way of working, but artificial intelligence and data centers where the artificial intelligence runs is very energy dependent. I'm not sure if Google or Microsoft are deciding to put data centers in Africa in the same way they are doing in other energy intensive regions such as the States or Europe or wherever. Is this happening? Is this going to be a problem in the near future with the African generations using technology in a similar way than other continents are doing?
It is going to be a problem because right now, I've met with delegations from Google, from Amazon, and other Microsoft. We had the big energy week. They were present. They're looking at doing a lot of that. But we have to first deal with the issues around access. If you don't have access, then it's a problem. It's like someone trying to sell electric vehicles to Africa. And I've seen in meetings all over in Europe, in America, and everywhere. And they make me these really great presentations. And I said, how are you going to drive a Tesla without lights? How are you going to charge it? You know, it's all fine. You have a Tesla, but then after the first 60 minutes of it running, you have to pack it up and then wait. Or maybe you need a diesel generator to charge that Tesla. Artificial intelligence is going to drive the future. Africa has to be competitive, and we cannot take a second-class place on this. Part of this is that this is why we need to have this fierce urgency of now. And that fierce urgency of now comes in a sense where we say we need to put more energy for Africans using, be it renewables, although you have a lot of the intermittent nature of it, it causes equation, but base load energy coming from oil, natural gas, and nuclear, you being able to use this baseload energy to say this baseload energy is going to provide you not megawatts, but you need gigawatts to take care of people and also take care of data centers so that we can be champions of the future. We need to move fast. And that's why those that call on us to stop using natural gas and not have nuclear energy in Africa, I think they're not just wrong, they are dead wrong. Because the more we live in Africa without energy, we cannot compete. And that is the issue. That's why you see Europe. Europe is not leading when it comes to AI. You know, you've seen that happening in India, you've seen it in America, you've seen it in the Middle East and all of that because they outsource everything. They're lacking energy. We cannot make that mistake and we cannot follow them on their societal path.
Excellent, NJ. We really love your perspective and passion around all these views. Let me ask you a question. Which countries, in your opinion, are best suited to overcome this energy gap and power their own digital future?
I see Egypt, I see South Africa as our two best bets right now, even Morocco. South Africa has everything. They can use shale, they can do shale gas in South Africa, they can frack here, they've lifted the moratorium on shale. They have the Orange Basin, they have so much gas that is going to be needed for domestic gas because at the end of the day, that's a big economy. That's Africa's most industrialized nation. The technologies are down here, they have that. Egypt, the same thing. Look at $15 billion in nuclear power plants. Look at what is happening in New Cairo. So they would be able to really champion that, but they have to move fast. And we don't have to have every African country become we 54 nations. We can't say everybody has to have one. We can build centers of excellence where we say South Africa, maybe in the southern region, Egypt in the northern region, then look at Nairobi, Kenya, which has done very well with geothermal, but being able to really use more hydro and power that and get these data centers moving, look at the future, and then look at Senegal, Mauritania in the west part of Africa. So you create these centers of excellence. We have the market. Intra-Africa free trade, 1.5 billion people. Imagine selling to that group, to that group and really prioritizing them.
NJ, before closing, let us ask you the last question as we do with all our guest speakers. If you had a magic wand, what would you do, one action, to, let's say, unlock the energy trilemma in Africa? What would you do?
I would make sure we shoot seismic and get so much data and put skin in the game by Africans to unlock potential. That is so key. Data, information, it's our biggest problem, because if you want to invest, you need data. Because of our lack of data, our risk metrics are up. People don't know about everything that is happening in the continent. So if it comes into oil and gas, get all the data. Don't wait for TGS or the foreign companies to come do it. Put some skin in the game. Get all the data. Know what you have. Do the interpretation. So when you get people come in, they can explore faster because you've done all the work. You just need big money people to come spot the worlds. And the same thing you could do with renewables. Get a lot of it. Get yourself ready, then the investors come, and by so doing, you have a better negotiation positions. You move faster because you need to invest in your future. That is so key.
Fantastic. NJ, it has been a pleasure to having you. Thank you very much. We will follow you on the media, and good luck with this fantastic vision you have.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me a chance to talk to you about making energy poverty history in Africa, and thank you for prioritizing Africa. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me.
Thank you very much, NJ. It was a pleasure.
It's a true honor. Have a nice one.
We hope you liked this conversation. Follow us on LinkedIn or subscribe for free to the podcast on the platform of your choice, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or Apple. Because in the next episode, Ravi and Jam will speak with Greg Wrightstone about climate alarmism.